The Celts who lived in Britain did not all belong to the same kingdom, and they did not all obey the same king. Britain was full of different tribes of Celts, and each tribe followed a different king. Old stories tell us that one of these kings was named Vortigern. Vortigern ruled a wealthy, powerful tribe of Celts in the middle of Britain. His people obeyed him, and the warriors who fought for him followed his commands. But Vortigern still was not happy. Other tribes of Celts from up north kept attacking his kingdom, and Vortigern was tired of fighting them off. That he wanted help. Vortigern sent a message across the North Sea to barbarian tribes called the Angles and the Saxons. "Come and help me fight against my enemies," he said. "That if you do, I will give you land to live on." Here in Britain, the Angles and the Saxons came across the North Sea into Britain and helped Vortigern fight his enemies. They liked Britain, so they settled down and stayed there. They sent word back to their friends, "Come live in Britain with us. There is plenty of room here." So more and more Angles and Saxons sailed across the North Sea to Britain. The whole middle part of Britain filled up with Angles and Saxons. The Celts did not like all these barbarians in their country, but there were so many Angles and Saxons that they could not drive them all out. Soon, the south and east part of Britain was completely occupied by Angles and Saxons. They divided the land into 7 kingdoms. Today, we call this part of Britain England, a name that comes from the word Angle. We call the people who live there Anglo-Saxons. Poor Celts. First the Romans attacked them. Now the Anglo-Saxons had driven them out of their own land. Some of the Celts decided to make the best of it. They married the Anglo-Saxons and lived with them in peace. But other Celts retreated up into the north and west of Britain to live by themselves. Today, we call the countries where the Celts lived Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Do you remember that the Celts told stories to each other rather than writing them down? The Angles and the Saxons did not do very much writing either. They did not write down their history. They did not write down their stories, and they did not keep records of what they did every day. So, although we know that the Angles and Saxons lived in England for a long time, we do not know what they did during all those years. This time in England is called the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. It is a dark time to us because we cannot read about what happened in the 7 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. The only stories that we have from this time are stories that were passed down from one bard to the next by word of mouth. The Anglo-Saxons told stories about their heroes, just as the Celts did. One of these stories was about a monster named Grendel and the great warrior who conquered him, Beowulf. The story of Beowulf is one of the oldest stories in the English language. It may have been told and retold for years before it was finally written down. The story was written in poetry, because poetry was easier to remember and perform for other people. The whole story of Beowulf is long and complicated, but here is a shorter version of the story for you to listen to. Hrothgar was king of a whole host of men, who fought for King Hrothgar again and again. Their strength and their courage was well known to all. So Hrothgar decided to build them a hall. It was hung all with tapestries, roofed all with slate, heated by fires enormously great. Each night of the week, his men gathered there, to feast and to sing and to put away care. Then they unrolled their blankets, slept next to the fire, while torchlight streamed out from the hall's highest spire. Now, this hall of the king stood on high solid ground, with safe friendly fields and great houses all round. But far, far away, over swampland and heath, lived a monster named Grendel, with sharp claws and teeth. He was hairy and hideous, tall as 2 trees. The biggest of men only came to his knees. In the last days of the Roman Empire, one religion, Christianity, spread all through the countries controlled by Rome. The Roman emperor himself became a Christian. He told his subjects that they should be Christians. Christianity was popular. Then the Roman Empire was destroyed. The time after the fall of the Roman Empire was known as the Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, even though the Roman Empire was gone, Christianity survived. Many people were still Christians in all the different lands that had once been ruled by Rome. And many of these Christians in the old Roman Empire followed a man called the Pope. The Pope was the leader of the Christian church in the city of Rome. Many people believed that God had given him the job of taking care of Christians all over the world. One day, the Pope was walking through the marketplace near his home when he saw slaves for sale. Men and women were being sold for large amounts of money, so that they could work for their masters for the rest of their lives. The Pope shook his head over this evil, but he walked over to look more closely at the slaves. 3 of the slaves, just boys, not much older than you, had very blonde hair, and their skins were white as paper. The Pope was used to seeing only dark-haired people around him. In those days, fair hair was unusual and strange. "Where did those boys come from?" he asked one of the slave traders. "From the island of Britain." The slave trader answered, "We sailed over there and kidnapped them." All the British look like that. Now, the Pope had never heard of the island of Britain. "Are the people of Britain Christians?" he asked. "Oh, no," the slave trader said. "They have never even heard of Christianity." The Pope bent down to talk to the blonde boys. "What are your people called?" he asked. "We were called Angles." The oldest boy said, "That we want to go back to our home." "Angles, you look more like angels," the Pope exclaimed. And he bought the boys so that they would not have to be slaves. He took them back to his home, fed them, sent them to school, and taught them about Christianity. Then he sent for another Christian named Augustine and told him about Britain and about the handsome Angles who lived there. "Augustine," he said, "I want you to go to Britain. Take these boys back to their homes so that they can tell their families about Christianity. And I want you to stay in Britain and teach these people more about our faith. Build churches in Britain. I will make you the Archbishop of England, and you can take care of all the Christians in the country." Augustine agreed to go to Britain. He took 40 men with him, and they set off on their journey to the island. They reached the coast of England in the year 597. There, they were greeted by the most powerful king in Britain, Ethelbert, who ruled the whole southern part of country. Ethelbert had heard that strangers were coming to do magic in his kingdom. That he met Augustine and his companions on the shore. "What strange powers do you have?" Ethelbert demanded. "I won't let you into my palace until I can be sure that you won't try to lay a spell on me." "We are not here to lay spells on you," Augustine said. "We are here to tell you about Christianity." And then he and his companions told Ethelbert all about the Christian faith. Ethelbert said. "This sounds interesting, but it's all very new to me, and I don't want to give up my old ways. But you have come a long way, and you seem to be quite polite and harmless. So I will give you permission to tell the people of my kingdom all about your God. You can live in Canterbury, and no one will bother you as long as you behave yourselves." So Augustine and his companions settled down in the town of Canterbury. They built a church and preached to the Anglo-Saxons. Eventually, many of the Anglo-Saxons became Christians. They learned how to read and how to write. They built churches and monasteries where men could live and worship God. And Augustine himself became the first Archbishop of Canterbury, the leader of all the Christians who lived in England. Augustine and the men who went with him to Britain were monks, men who had promised to spend the rest of their lives praying, working, and studying the Bible rather than marrying and having children. Monks lived together in special buildings called monasteries. They went to church 8 times a day to pray and worship God. During the day, they worked in the monastery garden, helped with the cooking, cleaning, and laundry, and did other jobs that the abbot, the chief monk, gave them to do. There were monasteries all through the old lands of the Roman Empire in Italy, Spain, Africa, and all the other countries that had once belonged to Rome. When the Anglo-Saxons learned about Christianities, some of them wanted to be monks too. So they built monasteries in England and in Ireland, where they could live just like other monks did. Brother Andrew is a monk in an Irish monastery. His job is to build furniture in the monastery workshop. The monks make all their own chairs, tables, and beds. This morning, Brother Andrew is working on building a new table for the refectory, the large room where the monks eat together. He is rubbing oil into the table's top to finish it, but he keeps stopping to blow on his fingers. He is cold. The workshop is in a stone shed, and there is a fireplace in one wall. But the December wind is blowing around the windows and in under the door, and it's still very dark outside because the sun has not risen yet. He is working by candlelight, and his eyes hurt. Brother Andrew hopes that the bell will ring soon to summon him to the refectory. He got up at 2 o'clock this morning for the early morning service, and then went on to his workshop to get started on the day's tasks. It must be nearly 5 o'clock by now, he thinks. Almost breakfast time. Finally, the bell rings. Brother Andrew puts on a heavy cloak and hood and walks toward the refectory. On his way, he passes a line of sick and hungry people who have already formed outside the monastery gates. Brother James knows a lot about herbs and about healing sickness. He is the only doctor within 3 days' journey, and villagers from several small villages nearby come up to the monastery whenever they get sick. The monks cook food for the hungry too, and serve it even before they eat themselves.